Good evening. Thank you all for waiting. This is a new thing for all of us, a two-night draft. So we're trying to figure out, I feel like this is a halftime interview because we still got another night to go tomorrow. But we're really excited. We did some things to add 3 different players to our roster who all have youth, all have athleticism, all play on both ends, and all want to be here in D.C. to continue what we have going. And we're excited about that. And I think that at the end of the day, we're going to add some good people. And I'm really, really excited for the way the draft finished tonight for us.
Will, you mentioned being able to add 3 players. How important was it, especially at the stage that you guys are at, to be as active as possible and kind of take chances? And that's not to say you're just grabbing anybody you can, but like I think a lot of people would say this draft is not as starry, but can you kind of speak to the importance of taking swings and just like getting talent in the door?
Yeah, for sure. I wouldn't use the context of taking swings. I think the group that we have downstairs in that arena, I guess it's our lounge that we turned into our draft room, is full of qualified people who did a tremendous job preparing us this year. We didn't have 2 weeks. We actually had a whole 12 months to prepare this year, and the scouts, they work their tails off. They identify players. They scour the streets, get information, and our strategy group is coming up with ideas. And this is kind of that time of year where you can combine, and we'll always be aggressive. We'll always try to be strategic. And when you have time to prepare, you kind of identify your players and the people you want to go get and do your best to go get them. Sometimes it works out. It takes 2 to tango, as you know. But we try to identify people first, try to identify talents, and if we can get them, we're going to get them. So I think you've seen in the last 2 years that we're willing to move and go get who we want to get.
Does the draft being 2 days, did it change anything for you guys?
Yeah, it did actually.
What exactly was that?
I can't give those secrets away, but I think we're all still here planning for tomorrow. That's the first one. But I think Michael and I, we tried to make sure we took some notes on how it was different. The second round tomorrow will be a true experiment, like the first time we've ever done it. But we addressed the first round like it was a full night and probably prepared as we would for a normal draft, but it definitely feels different.
Alex Sarr obviously has the size, the length, and the athleticism. What can you say about his intangibles and how you picked up on them throughout the evaluation process?
Yeah, I think Alex is a special young man. He has a humility to him, but also a confidence. So when you put those things together with the work ethic that he's proven, and he's not afraid to really explore his game and take chances. So he left home at 14, went to Madrid, played there for a few years, went to America, tried something new with OTE, wanted another challenge, went and played with grown men in Australia. So he's someone that's always looking for more, always trying to get better and compete, and knows who he is. So when you talk to him, it's like a quiet confidence that he knows he's going to continue to get better and has a lot of work to do, but he didn't run away from that. So he's a true basketball player.
And Keyon George, as I understand it, was kind of a late riser, late bloomer. So how long has he been on your radar, and just kind of what sold you on making him a first-round pick?
Yeah, I think Key's done a really good job when he first hopped on the scene. We've seen him play overseas before he played at Miami, so he played in France as well. And one of our scouts early on in the process was like, hey, I'm at a tournament in November. You need to come see this kid. I was like, I'll be there next week. And then another scout was like, you probably need to come see this kid again. So he's someone that you didn't know as well, but he picked it up really, really quickly. And the same with Bub. Started the season, first game's a triple-double, and he's on everybody's radar again. You're like, okay, let's keep tracking these guys. And, again, guys that have the length and the athleticism and the playmaking, those guys are always going to show up on our radar, but they did a really good job of putting themselves on there sooner than later.
How much intel did you glean from seeing Alex in OKC's building and going with his brother and working out, and what kind of kid he was and what his work ethic was and how much he wanted to get better?
It's a unique opportunity, I guess I would say I had in this draft to see some of the family members from players that I was with in other situations. And the best thing is you just have an idea of who they are because you've been with their families and you really know where they come from. So probably a little bit of advantage, but he's completely his own person. And he's completely different from Olivier. But we know where they come from, we know what they're about, and they're both serious and they both want to get better. And physically, Olivier grew into a monster. And if you just continue to watch Alex behind him when you first meet him to where he is now, you see him on a similar trajectory.
And Keyshawn was on the under-19 team, is that right?
Mhm.
How did he perform in that tournament, and how did that kind of maybe start to separate himself a
I
little?
think both him and Alex played international basketball. You got to watch them in their peer group, gangly, long, try to predict what it's going to look like. But we do a really good job of making sure we cover that. That's really important to us, important to Travis, and our international guys do a really good job of that. So one of our scouts is headed over there tomorrow to start watching the U17 championship. So it doesn't really end, but we make sure we cover those things.
Will, you spoke about Alex's intangibles. What does he do well on the court right now,
Yeah.
and what does he need to improve on?
Yeah, I'll leave part of that for when you guys meet him. But when we talk, he knows that he's probably going to be a defensive player first. And that's the approach I think you see when you go watch him in a strong, more professional league, playing the center spot in a physical league over there in Australia. If you watch those playoff games, he had meaningful minutes off the bench. And it was energy. It was talking, something that young players don't do, defensively calling things out. So you go watch him in practice, you go watch him in shoot around, and the professionalism sticks out. Defensively, I think he can guard, he can switch, he can protect the rim. He's got to get better on the glass. When you asked about things he can improve upon, I think it's a physicality, but also a mindset as he gets older. Then offensively, he's got a lot of upside on that end too. But he'll tell you that he's going to be a defensive-minded player first. The offensive stuff will take some time, but 7'1", 7'4" wingspan, get the ball off the rim, dribble it up, initiate offense, space the floor, roll, make passes off the pocket on the, I guess, middle pick and roll, find the corner from there. There's a lot of stuff there, but it's going to start on the defensive end.
Your team got considerably younger tonight. How do you, as an organization, navigate that, and what does it say about your timeline?
Yeah, like we said, we're not going to put a specific timeline on the rebuild here. We're going to just continue to take every night like this as an opportunity. When you look at Bub, who's still 18, I think he was the fifth youngest player taken tonight, and I think Alex might have been the sixth youngest player taken tonight. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's pretty close. And you look at Bub, and he was 5'11" a couple years ago. Now he's 6'5". He's still growing into his body. So those guys have a longer opportunity to grow and develop. And when you see the people that Michael's added into the organization who are about player development, you see the coach and Brian Keefe and the assistants that we're going to hire to continue to preach that. Guys that have a longer runway are guys we're going to take advantage of and try to make sure we provide a platform and just resources for them to do their best work. But again, there's a lot of work ahead of them. We explain that to them, and to a man, all three of them want to embrace the challenge and kind of help push us forward.
Back to your right side.
Well, Alex, he mentioned that he's excited to play alongside Bilal because of the French connection. But knowing what you know about Bilal and what you know about Alex, how do you see them meshing together?
Yeah, it's funny. Bilal's in Paris. I think they're still at Paris. They leave tomorrow to head up to camp. He was FaceTiming me earlier today. He's like, who are we taking? Who are we taking? And when we discussed the players a little bit, because he obviously knows Alex, he said he's a defensive guy. He's a good guy. He's going to be good in the locker room. But I think when you see both lottery picks that we've taken, you see the athleticism, you see the length, you see the defensive first mentality, and we're going to be a defensive team. We're going to get to that point. When we talked at the end of our season presser, that wasn't good enough last year. So we're going to continue to add those guys, but I think they both have bright futures and have the mindset to be patient to get the most out of themselves. So they're going to be workers. They obviously can speak French to each other, so that'll be helpful through the rookie transition for Alex. But they compete, and they both have upsides as two-way players, but their mindset are mature players. They're not your average rookies when it comes in just to mentality, and I think that'll help us, but also help them.
And then Bub, he said that there was an interest. He knew there was an interest, but he was surprised to be picked by the Wizards. How do you see him fitting in?
Bub, he's a great kid. We spent a really funny lunch just talking football, talking sports, talking life, and just really connecting to see if he can really handle coming back home, because that's not the same from everybody. I know Baltimore, D.C. area, like we are a proud culture here in D.C. in the DMV area about basketball, and he's obviously lived the life where he's seen this area blossom from his dad and his granddad, and has been a hooper his whole life. So when you have those conversations with someone that's like, DC, this is home, like I can handle that, that would be great. You got to have those real conversations with everybody. So Bub's a good kid. He's a good worker, and he's excited to be here. I'm glad he was surprised because he probably didn't know we had the pick at the time. We were moving up and a lot was going on. But he can play on the ball. He can play off the ball. I think he grew up playing off the ball more. You saw him at the very first game, the half of the season at Pitt. He was playing point guard just to add more offense. They moved him off the ball. He still was efficient. And once he was off the ball the last half of the season, last 15 games, he was probably shooting close to 40% towards the end of the season from three. So he found ways to get people involved, but also learned how to play off the ball. And like we said, we want multiple decision makers. We want the game to be random within a system, to where you're making reads, anybody can drive the ball, anybody can make a decision. And we added 3 guys who can do that tonight, and 3 guys who also want to compete on the defensive end. So I think that's how Bub, but the other 2 fit in as well.
If we look towards the near future, the first couple weeks of the regular season, out of these 3 guys, who do you foresee as, getting serious minutes maybe, and guys who maybe you want to take a more cautious approach with when it comes to their playing time?
It's halftime. We haven't even finished the draft yet. We might be adding more guys. Let's get to Summer League first, and then we'll spend a little bit more time on that. But like Brian told you, it's going to be opportunity. We're going to make sure we put a plan in place for every single player that's based on their pace. And we won't skip steps in that. So our player development system, each player is involved, and each coach is involved. But it's also everyone that supports them. So we'll put a plan in place. We already have their performance plan ready for them when they get here tomorrow. And a PDF, they will get it, and we'll talk about the next steps to prepare for training camp for Summer League, what we want you to do during Summer League, after Summer League, what that gap is before the season starts, and then the ramp up into the season. So Danny Medina and our medical staff, they've got that covered for everybody in the first round that we potentially could have taken, and we'll put a plan in place that makes sense. But we'll get to Summer League first.
With Keyon, you said the multiple scouts told you to take a look at this kid.
Yeah.
So once you got to look at him, what jumped out to you is like, man, this kid's really good at doing this? And then when he got to Miami, what really wowed you about him?
Other than the hair, I think the hair was the first thing that jumped out. We had breakfast, I think, the other day before he took off, and I was sharing pictures of my son's hair versus his hair before I cut it. So that popped right away. Instantly, you saw the size. 6'8", I think it's a 6'10" wingspan. He's a second side facilitator, but when they had some injuries, he played on the ball. And again, we're looking for guys who can create and make plays. And at the end of the day, he's going to wake up every morning and be 6'10", play on the wing, and 40% three-point shooter, I think he finished by the end of the season. So that stuff popped quickly. We'll continue to get him to defend and rebound and play with pace here, and add him with some other guys that like basketball and throw him in the mix.
Will, we spoke with Gino during the season. He mentioned the draft process of dealing with you in OKC. And he
Not Gino, please. Don't use him.
He equated you to the questions that you ask is very unconventional. So if you can open the door for us a bit in what are some of the types of questions you like to ask the guys to get to know them that is not specifically basketball but gives you an insight into who they are?
Yeah.
He called you an FBI agent, to be honest.
I've lightened up since Gino because of that, actually. I don't think – say it again. No one believes me. It's true. I promise you. It is true. I don't think it's that different. I think I just find different ways to communicate and ask the questions that they're probably not being asked by surface-level interviews. We want to make sure every player that comes here gets a personal touch. So they're not in Ubers. They're not in car services. Like, we pick them up. They're in my personal car. Some are eating dinner, like, with us every single night they're here. We're not just paying for per diem. And over that course of time, you get to know people. So by the end of the visit, you can really open up and ask the real questions. And I just really want to know what makes people tick, like what they're about. Michael Winger is all about transparency and truth, and I try to make sure that we have that throughout the entire organization. And I explain, this is what we're about, and we're unapologetically going to be us. And if that doesn't work for you, that doesn't work for you. But if it does, let's make a really good pairing. And at the end of the day, like I told you, our scouts are on it. I think the players midway through realize that we have the intel and we already have the answers, so you might as well just be honest. But when you have a relationship and you can develop that during the draft process, I think it makes it a cool thing. But Ava, I've gotten a lot nicer in the draft combine, at least. The draft combine, we're a little nicer.
And with Alex, he had mentioned prior to draft night that he wanted to be in DC. He also told us on the conference call that the Wizards were the only team he actually did a draft workout for. So knowing that the pick with Atlanta going where they wanted to ended up working in the favor of who you wanted, and that kind of coinciding with him only picking one team. What does that now tell you about him if you did not realize that you were the only team he worked out for?
Yeah, I can't really control the draft or what happens in front of us or behind us. I can only control what we do here in D.C. And the fact that Alex and his agency wanted to come here and work out and see the city, we were more than happy to put that in and get that done for him. So I'm happy he wants to be here. I'm happy he came in to visit. But at the end of the day, we can't control what happens around us, and we just focus on the Wizards.
Hey, Will, over here, kind of similar, following up on the fact that Alex, and I know you mentioned the other two guys drafted tonight, wanted to be here as well. When you guys have kind of the master plan, the big future that you and Michael and everybody else in the front office envisions for this team, how huge is it when you're getting the players you want and they're buying into that vision of the future as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think if you reference back to the end of the season when our players did their exit interviews, I think you guys touched on it when you guys asked Michael and I in our exit interview about the environment and this place being a place where players got better, but also a place where they wanted to be. And that from the very beginning when we got here was something we wanted to change. And I think you felt that. I know we want to make the environment a little bit even more repeatable this year, but when you get guys who are aligned and they have the transparency and level of communication that we have from the outset, it makes it a little easier. But D.C. is a great city. D.C. is a place where guys will get better, and we want their agents to understand we're going to treat them with the highest level of respect and give them resources to maximize themselves. And I think there's a lot of opportunity here for players, especially young players. But our current roster players want to be here too, and they want to keep pushing this thing forward. So for us, we just want to create an environment where we treat people well and we give them the resources to work, and we hold them accountable to that. And I think everybody, when you're up front, can get on the same page. And Brian will do a really good job of making sure that happens from the very outset, going into Summer League. And we'll have meetings on that this weekend. But, again, when guys want to be here and they're the right people and the right fit and are also fit the talent bucket, you feel good about that.
And just kind of personally for you going through this draft, what was tonight like? I mean, what was it like when you got, I don't know if you submit a card or how it works, but what was it like when you got to say, we're taking this guy at this pick? And how did it feel for you and Michael to really be doing this thing tonight?
It felt really good, not because of the outcomes. Like, we'll know 4 or 5 years down the line, everybody makes mistakes. Sometimes you get it right. You hope we had a good night. We feel good about it tonight, but that's part of the draft. It felt good because we were doing it with a group of people that we kind of went through a lot of the muck with this time. Before, last year when you walked in, you were kind of doing it on our own. Me and Mike had worked together, but we felt really connected with the group today, and that was the best feeling by far. We knew each other's moves. We were well documented on communicating who's doing this, who's doing that. And I think the room to each man and women in there, everyone had a role and responsibility, and we're thinking the same. So we're starting to change in the front office and develop a mentality as well. So it was a good night, and hopefully these guys work and we work, and it's a perfect match.
Thank you.
Let's go with 2 more. Hey, Will. When we talked to Bub just a few minutes ago,
How was he?
he was good. He was good. He talked about how being a multi-sport athlete in high school, he learned different things from each game that he felt like were transferable to basketball. Is that something that you're interested in terms of guys with backgrounds in multiple sports who maybe have pulled different things, whether it be IQ from other sports or just intangibles?
Yeah, I think the studies would show people who play multiple sports at a young age have an advantage just how you learn, and more importantly, how you operate it as individuals within a team concept. So the more team sports you can play, I think the more you understand what goes into winning. Him and I, we made an agreement we really can't talk other sports because he's a deep Ravens fan, so we've gotten into it a couple of times already. So we try not to talk about his other sports, but he's a competitor, he's an athlete, and he's just a sports junkie, so he's going to live in the gym. So that also is an advantage for sure.
I'll finish with Noah.
Hey, Will, over here. Just wondering, what do you make of sort of the amount of talent that's come out of France the last couple of years, and what are they doing to sort of get so many guys on the NBA radar screen?
I feel like I had that same question a year ago, and it's only getting better. And I'll be honest, it's going to continue to get better because there's some more guys coming. I talked with Bilal before he went back to France just on what's going on here. I think, again, it's the level of teaching they're getting. The coaching has improved. The examples that they've had in terms of people who have made it, the access to just seeing and watching and YouTube and exposure that they're getting at a young age has contributed to it. But at the end of the day, they've always had athletes. They've always had talent. I think the world is starting to recognize that, but they're also starting at younger ages and not necessarily staying in France. They used to all go to like INSEP and one academy and kind of not beat each other up, but it was like one spot. Now you see guys going to Oswell. You see guys going to Chalon. You see guys going to Cholet, going to Bourg, like trying it on their own. And I think they're going a little faster that way. But again, I think the players get most of the credit. They compete, they get after it. And the ones that come to the NBA have done a really good job of proving that they belong and that they can really have an impact. And again, I think it's the second year in a row. I know for sure this year there's 4 international players, first team All-NBA. The game's changing. The game's evolving, and it's going to continue to do so, and we have to scout globally.